The transport ship's stellar wings came out of hyperspace with a gentle hum that barely shook the massive vessel. Inside the passenger bay, 23 human students pressed their faces against the viewing ports to get their first look at Zephyria. Prime, the planet below, looked like a perfect blue marble, with white clouds swirling over green continents and calm oceans. "Would you look at that?" Jake Morrison whispered to his seatmate, Lisa Chun. "No storms, no hurricanes, no nothing. Just perfect weather everywhere." Lisa nodded as she studied the planet through her tablet's scanner. "The atmospheric readings are incredible. No temperature variations, no pressure changes, no toxic gases. This place is like a garden world from the movies." Behind them, Mike Patterson stretched in his seat and yawned. "I slept through most of the jump. How long until we dock?" "About 30 minutes, Amy Rodriguez called from across the aisle. She was reading through the welcome packet they had all received. "Says here that Zephyria Prime has never had a natural disaster. No earthquakes, no volcanoes, no severe weather. The gravity is exactly 1G, and the air is perfectly breathable for humans." Jake laughed. "Sounds boring. What do they do for excitement around here?" The ship's intercom crackled to life with a translated voice. "Attention human passengers. This is Captain Zareth speaking. We will be docking at Galactic University Station in 25 minutes. Please prepare for customs processing. Remember that you are the first human students ever to attend this institution. The entire galaxy will be watching your performance." The humans exchanged glances. They all knew they were part of something historic. The Galactic University of Advanced Sciences was the most prestigious learning institution in known space. For 300 years, it had educated the brightest minds from dozens of species. Now, for the first time, they were accepting students from Earth. Down on the planet's surface, Professor Veltar paced nervously in his office overlooking the university's main campus. The Zephyrian administrator had spent the last 6 months preparing for this day, and he still felt completely unprepared. His forearms gestured wildly as he spoke to his assistant, Kriya. "Are you certain the medical bay is ready?" Veltar asked for the 10th time that morning. "These humans come from a Class 12 death world. Their very planet is trying to kill them every moment of every day." Krija, a smaller Zephyrian with pale blue skin, checked her datapad. "Yes, Professor. We have tripled our medical staff. We have installed emergency response stations in every building. We have even rounded all the sharp corners in the dormitories and covered them with soft padding." Veltar's large black eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme anxiety in his species. "What if they get hurt? What if they die while under our care? The Galactic Council will shut down the exchange program before it even begins." "Professor," Krija said gently, "perhaps you are worrying too much. The reports say these humans are quite resilient." "Resilient?" Veltar's voice rose to a squeak. "Krija, do you know what Earth is like? The atmospheric pressure changes constantly. The weather can kill you in minutes. There are creatures that hunt other creatures for food. The very star that lights their world bombards them with deadly radiation every day. And somehow, these beings not only survive, but thrive in such conditions." Across the campus, word had spread that the Deathworlders were arriving. Students from dozens of species gathered in small groups, whispering excitedly and nervously about the humans. The Gornathi students, massive bear-like beings with thick fur and powerful claws, spoke in hushed tones about the legendary warriors from the Death Planet. The Kalashi, with their natural armor plating and multiple eyes, discussed the humans' rumored ability to survive in any environment. "I heard they can go days without food or water," whispered a young Antarian student, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "My cousin works on a trading ship," added a Nexian student, his crystalline body refracting the light as he spoke. He says humans can survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. Something about their blood being able to store oxygen. That cannot be true, protested a Zephyrian student. No organic being can survive in vacuum. These are Deathworlders. The Nexian replied, normal rules do not apply to them. The rumors grew more wild with each telling. By the time the transport ship docked at the station, some students believed the humans could breathe fire and had natural weapons hidden under their skin. The docking process took longer than usual because of all the extra safety precautions. Teams of medical specialists stood ready with emergency equipment. Security officers watched nervously, unsure what to expect from the legendary Deathworlders. When the airlock finally opened, the alien students who had gathered to watch fell silent. The beings that emerged from the ship looked nothing like the fearsome warriors they had imagined. The humans were relatively small, most standing no taller than the average Zephyrian. Their skin looked soft and fragile, with no natural armor or obvious weapons. They moved with casual confidence, but they seemed almost delicate compared to the heavily built Gornathi or the naturally armored Kela Shi. Jake Morrison stepped off the ship first, carrying a simple backpack and looking around with obvious curiosity. He had brown hair and green eyes, and he wore what appeared to be standard civilian clothing. Behind him came Lisa Chun, a young woman with long black hair and an easy smile. She carried a datapad and was already taking readings of the stations. Atmosphere. Welcome to Galactic University Station, Professor Veltar said, approaching the group with careful steps. His translator converted his words into English. I am Professor Veltar, your academic coordinator. On behalf of the entire university, I welcome you to Zephyria Prime. Jake stepped forward and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. Thank you, Professor. I'm Jake Morrison, and this is Lisa Chun. We're really excited to be here. Veltar stared at the extended hand for a moment, then carefully reached out with one of his 4 arms to shake it. The human's grip was firm, but not crushing, and his skin felt surprisingly warm. I hope your journey was comfortable, Veltar said. Oh, it was great, Lisa said, looking around at the gathered alien students. The ship had artificial gravity and everything, much smoother than some flights back. Home. Professor Veltar blinked in confusion. According to his research, human transportation was primitive and dangerous. How could they compare interstellar travel to their own crude methods? If you will follow me, Veltar said, we will proceed to the customs area and then to your dormitories. I must warn you that there will be extensive safety briefings over the next few days. Safety briefings? Mike Patterson asked, joining the conversation. What kind of safety issues are we talking about? Veltar's anxiety spiked. Did the human not understand the dangers of living away from his death world? Well, there are proper procedures for laboratory work, emergency evacuation routes, hazardous material handling protocols, atmospheric processing system safety measures. Sounds pretty standard, Amy Rodriguez said with a shrug. Is the campus environment particularly dangerous? The alien students who were watching this exchange looked at each other in amazement. Either these humans were completely unaware of danger, or they had a very different understanding of what constituted risk. As the group moved through the station toward the university shuttles, the human students chatted casually among themselves, pointing out interesting architectural features and asking questions about the local technology. They showed no signs of the fear or caution that visitors from other worlds typically displayed when arriving at a new planet. Professor Veltar walked alongside them, his worry growing with each casual comment they made. These beings seemed completely unprepared for the careful, regulated environment of Zephyria Prime. How was he going to keep them safe when they seemed to have no concept of proper safety protocols? The shuttle ride to the planet's surface took 20 minutes, during which the human students pressed against the windows to admire the scenery. The alien students on the same shuttle watched them nervously, still trying to reconcile the ordinary-looking beings before them with the terrifying reputation of Deathworlders. As they descended toward the university campus, Jake Morrison looked out at the peaceful, perfectly manicured landscape below and smiled. "This is going to be interesting," he said to Lisa. Neither of them could imagine just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The orientation week at Galactic University began at dawn on Monday, with the sound of gentle chimes echoing across the campus. The alien students filed into the massive auditorium in orderly groups, each species sitting together in their designated sections. The Zephyrians took up the front rows, their pale blue skin gleaming under the soft lights. Behind them sat the Gornithi, their massive forms requiring specially reinforced seating. The crystalline Nexians occupied a section where the light could refract beautifully through their bodies, while the tentacled Hentarians clustered in an area with extra space for their flexible limbs. The human students entered the auditorium together, looking around with obvious interest at the diverse gathering. Jake Morrison whistled softly as he took in the sight of hundreds of alien beings all in one place. Lisa Chun was already taking notes on her tablet, documenting the different species she observed. Mike Patterson and Amy Rodriguez followed behind, chatting quietly about the impressive architecture of the building. Professor Veltar stood at the podium, his forearms gesturing as he addressed the assembled students. His translator worked overtime to convert his words into dozens of different languages simultaneously. "Welcome, students, to your mandatory safety orientation," Veltar began. "Over the next 3 days, you will learn the essential protocols that will keep you safe during your studies here. These procedures have been developed over centuries and have prevented countless accidents and injuries." The alien students sat at attention, many taking careful notes. This orientation was serious business, and everyone understood its importance. Everyone except the human students, who seemed more interested in looking around the auditorium than listening to the presentation. Jake yawned openly and stretched in his seat. Lisa was reading something on her tablet that was clearly unrelated to the safety briefing. Mike had his eyes closed and appeared to be dozing, while Amy was sketching the alien students sitting nearby. Professor Veltar noticed the humans' lack of attention and felt his anxiety spike. Did they not understand how important this information was? He cleared his throat and continued. "We will begin with basic laboratory safety protocols," Veltar announced. A holographic display appeared above the podium, showing a standard university chemistry lab. All students must wear full protective equipment when working with any chemical substances, no matter how mild they may seem. The display showed an alien student putting on what looked like a full environmental suit, complete with an enclosed helmet and independent air supply. The equipment was bulky and made even simple tasks difficult, but it provided complete protection from any possible contamination. The minimum safety equipment includes atmospheric isolation gear, chemical-resistant outer shell, impact protection for all limbs, and emergency communication devices, Veltar explained. This equipment must be worn at all times when in any laboratory environment. A Zephyrian student raised one of his arms. "Professor, what about the basic chemical analysis we do in first-year classes? Surely that level of protection is not necessary for such simple compounds?" "All chemicals are potentially dangerous," Veltar replied firmly. "Even the mildest substances can cause harm if proper precautions are not taken. This is why we follow the same safety protocols for all laboratory work." Jake Morrison raised his hand, causing a stir throughout the auditorium. It was the first time any of the humans had participated in the presentation. "Yes, Mr. Morrison?" Veltar said, trying to hide his relief that the human was finally paying attention. "I was just wondering," Jake said in a casual tone, "what kind of chemicals are we talking about here?" Because that protective gear looks pretty intense. Veltar consulted his notes. The first-year chemistry course works primarily with basic compounds such as diluted acids, simple salts, and organic solvents. Nothing particularly hazardous, which is why we use the standard protective protocols. Lisa Chun looked up from her tablet. When you say diluted acids, what concentration are we talking about? The hydrochloric acid solutions are typically 0.01 molar, Veltar replied. We maintain very low concentrations to minimize any risk. The human students exchanged glances. Mike Patterson spoke up. That's basically the same acidity as lemon juice. Why do you need a full environmental suit for that? A shocked silence fell over the auditorium. The alien students stared at the humans in horror. How could they be so casual about exposure to acid, even diluted acid? Mr. Patterson, Veltar said carefully, even diluted acids can cause severe injury if they come into contact with skin or are accidentally inhaled. Amy Rodriguez raised her hand. Back home, we used stronger acids than that in high school chemistry. Class, we just wore safety glasses and lab coats. The Gorlithy students began making worried, rumbling sounds deep in their chests. The Nexians' crystalline bodies started flickering with nervous energy. Even the usually calm Zephyrians began whispering among themselves. Professor Veltar felt faint. These humans spoke about acid exposure as if it was nothing unusual. He had heard stories about the deadly nature of their home world, but this was beyond what he had imagined. Perhaps we should move on to the next topic, Veltar said quickly. The holographic display changed to show the university's atmospheric processing system. All students must be familiar with emergency air supply procedures. In the event of atmospheric contamination, students must immediately don emergency breathing apparatus and proceed to designated safe areas. The display showed the locations of emergency oxygen supplies throughout the campus. There were stations every 50 meters in the hallways, and every room had multiple backup systems. The emergency breathing units provide 6 hours of clean air, Veltar explained. This should be sufficient time for emergency teams to resolve any atmospheric problems and restore normal conditions. Jake looked confused. What kind of atmospheric problems are we talking about? The air here seems pretty clean to me. Well, Veltar said, there could be contamination from the chemistry labs, or a malfunction in the air recycling systems, or even pollen from the ornamental plants during certain seasons. Pollen? Lisa asked. You need emergency breathing equipment because of pollen? Some students are sensitive to organic particles in the air, Veltar explained. The emergency systems ensure that everyone can breathe safely, regardless of atmospheric conditions. Mike Patterson scratched his head. Where I come from, we just call that spring allergies. Most people just take an antihistamine and deal with it. The alien students were becoming increasingly agitated. How could these humans be so cavalier about atmospheric contamination? Did they not understand that breathing contaminated air could be fatal? The safety presentation continued for 3 more hours, covering everything from proper walking techniques to avoid injury on the campus paths to emergency procedures for minor temperature fluctuations in the dormitories. With each topic, the gap between alien caution and human indifference became more apparent when Professor Veltar demonstrated the proper technique for opening doors to avoid pinching fingers. Jake actually laughed out loud. When the presentation covered the importance of walking slowly on stairs to prevent falls, Amy made a comment about how she used to run up and down stairs as a child without any safety equipment at all. By the time the morning session ended, the alien students were thoroughly convinced that the humans were either completely insane or possessed of supernatural durability. The humans, meanwhile, seemed puzzled by what they clearly considered excessive caution. During the lunch break, the different species naturally separated into their own groups. The alien students gathered in worried clusters, discussing what they had witnessed. "Did you hear what the female human said about stairs?" whispered a young Antarian, her tentacles coiled tightly with anxiety. She claimed to run on them as a juvenile, running on stairs, without safety equipment. A Gornithy student shook his massive head. "These Deathworlders are more dangerous than we imagined. They show no fear of anything. How can we share a campus with beings who think acid exposure is normal? Maybe they cannot feel pain the way we do," suggested a Nexian student. "Perhaps their nervous systems are different." Meanwhile, the human students sat together at their own table, sharing a meal that would have been considered barely edible emergency rations by most species, but which they seemed to enjoy. "This orientation is pretty funny," Jake said between bites. "I've never seen so much safety equipment for such basic stuff." "It's like they've never dealt with any real danger," Lisa agreed. "Wait until they see what we consider normal back home." Amy looked around at the nervous alien students. "I think we're making them uncomfortable. Maybe we should try to be more supportive of their safety protocols." "Good idea," Mike said. "We don't want them thinking we're reckless or anything." None of the humans realized that they had already established a reputation as fearless beings who treated deadly hazards. Minor inconveniences. The afternoon safety session would only make this impression stronger. When the orientation resumed, Professor Veltar introduced the topic of radiation safety. The very word made several alien students shift nervously in their seats. The universities. Research facilities include equipment that produces low-level radiation, Veltar explained. 3 weeks had passed since the human students arrived at Galactic University, and Professor Veltar was still losing sleep over their casual attitude toward safety. Every day brought new incidents that left him questioning everything he thought. He knew about proper emergency procedures. Just that morning, he had found Jake Morrison calmly eating his breakfast in the dining hall during a minor atmospheric alert. When asked why he had not evacuated to the safe zones like all the other students, Jake had simply said that the air quality readings were totally fine, and he was hungry. The atmospheric alert had been triggered by a barely detectable increase in carbon dioxide levels that would have sent most species into respiratory distress. Now, as Veltar stood in the emergency command center reviewing the quarterly disaster drill procedures, he felt his 4 stomachs churning with anxiety. Today was the day of the annual emergency evacuation exercise, and he had no idea how the humans would react to a simulated crisis. The drill scenario was carefully designed to test every aspect of the university's emergency response systems. At precisely noon, alarms would sound throughout the campus announcing a simulated reactor leak in the main physics building. Students and faculty would have exactly 18 minutes to evacuate to designated safe zones located at least 1 kilometer away from the affected area. The scenario was based on a real incident that had occurred at another university 50 years ago. A minor cooling system failure had released trace amounts of radioactive steam into one building. No one had been seriously injured, but the evacuation had taken over an hour because students had panicked and clogged the emergency exits. Since then, regular drills had been mandatory at all galactic educational institutions. "Are all monitoring stations ready?" Veltar asked Krisia, who was coordinating the drill from the command center. "Yes, Professor," she replied, checking her displays. "We have observers positioned at every emergency exit and safe zone. The simulation will show radiation levels increasing gradually over the 18-minute period, giving students time to evacuate in an orderly fashion." Veltar nodded, but his mind was on the human students. They had attended the drill briefings, but their questions had been disturbing. Jake Morrison had asked about the actual radiation levels in the simulation. When told that the fake readings would reach 20 millisieverts per hour at the peak, he had seemed confused about why that would require evacuation. Lisa Chun had been even more concerning. She had studied the building layouts and pointed out that the emergency exits were designed for maximum safety rather than maximum efficiency. She had suggested several alternative routes that would cut evacuation time in half, apparently not understanding that the approved routes had been carefully tested and certified by safety experts. "All stations report ready," Krija announced. "Beginning drill sequence in 3, 2, 1. The emergency alarms began wailing across the campus, their piercing tones designed to cut through any background noise and demand immediate attention. Red lights flashed in every building, and automated announcements began broadcasting evacuation instructions in dozens of languages. From his position in the command center, Professor Valtar watched the monitoring screens as students began streaming out of buildings across the campus. The Zephyrian students moved in perfect formation, following their assigned routes to the designated safe zones. The Gornathi students moved more slowly due to their size, but they maintained strict discipline and stayed in their proper groups. The Nexians flowed like liquid light through the corridors, their crystalline forms reflecting the emergency lighting. In beautiful but orderly patterns. Everything was proceeding exactly according to the drill manual until Valtar noticed something that made his blood freeze. The human life signs were not moving toward the safe zones. According to the tracking systems, all 4 human students were still inside the physics building, right in the center of the simulated danger zone. "Krija, check the human student tracking signals," Valtar said, his voice rising with panic. "The system shows them still inside the affected building." Krija's pale blue skin turned almost white as she confirmed the readings. "Professor, they are not just inside the building. They are moving deeper into it. The signals show them going down to the basement levels." Valtar felt faint. The basement levels of the physics building were designated as the most dangerous area in the simulation. The fake radiation readings there would be showing lethal levels by now. Either the humans had completely misunderstood the evacuation procedures, or something was terribly wrong. "Send a security team to find them immediately," Valtar ordered, "and have medical standing by." But before the security team could reach the physics building, Valtar's communicator crackled to life with Jake Morrison's voice. "Hey, Professor. This is Jake. We are down in the physics building basement, and I wanted to let you know that we have got the situation under control down here." "Mr. Morrison," Valtar gasped, "you need to evacuate immediately. The radiation levels in your area are approaching lethal limits." There was a pause, then Jake's voice came back, sounding puzzled. "Professor, I am looking at the actual sensor readings down here, and the radiation levels are barely above background. The simulation numbers on the alert system do not match what is really happening." Valtar stared at his monitors in confusion. The drill was supposed to be a simulation, but Jake was talking about real sensor readings. "Mr. Morrison, this is a drill. The radiation readings are simulated for training purposes." "Oh, we know it is a drill," came Lisa Chun's voice over the communicator. "But we figured since we were down here anyway, we might as well help Dr. Zentar evacuate some of his sensitive equipment. Some of this stuff is pretty valuable, and it would be a shame to lose it, even in a fake emergency." Professor Valtar's 4 hearts nearly stopped beating. Dr. Zentar was the elderly Nexian professor who supervised the Advanced Physics Research Lab. He was supposed to be evacuating with all the other faculty members. "Dr. Zentar is supposed to be at the safe zone," Valtar said into his communicator. "Why is he still in the building?" Mike Patterson's voice joined the conversation. He was trying to shut down some kind of experimental setup when the alarm started. Guy was moving pretty slow, so we offered to help him carry stuff out. "No big deal." "No big deal?" Valtar repeated in a strangled voice. "You are in the most dangerous area of a radiation leak scenario, and you think it is no big deal?" "Well, yeah," Amy Rodriguez chimed in. "I mean, if this was a real emergency, the radiation levels would be way higher than what we are seeing. Plus, we checked the structural integrity of the building, and everything looks solid. No reason to panic. The security team that had been sent to find the humans reported in over the radio. Command, we have visual on the human students. They are in the sub-basement of the physics building, and they appear to be helping Dr. Zentar move laboratory equipment. All subjects appear calm and uninjured. Professor Veltar sank into his chair, overwhelmed by what he was hearing. Not only had the humans ignored the evacuation procedures, but they had correctly assessed the actual risk level and made a rational decision to help a faculty member rather than flee to safety. It was exactly the kind of independent thinking that the emergency protocols were designed to prevent. The humans have located Dr. Zuntar and are assisting with equipment evacuation, the security team reported. Dr. Zintar appears to be in good health and grateful for the assistance. Over the communicator, Jake's voice came through again. Professor, we should be able to get Dr. Zintar and all his important equipment out of here in about 10 more minutes. Is that okay? Or do you need us to move faster? Veltar looked around the emergency command center, where dozens of alien staff members were staring at him in shock. In 300 years of emergency drills, no students had ever ignored evacuation. Procedures to conduct their own risk assessment and rescue mission. Mr. Morrison, Veltar said slowly, can you explain why you did not follow the evacuation procedures? Well, Jake replied, when the alarms went off, we looked at the actual sensor data instead of just the alert messages. The real radiation readings were basically normal, so we figured the drill was just testing administrative procedures, not actual emergency response. Then we saw Dr. Zingtar was having trouble with his equipment, so we thought we should help him out. Lisa's voice added, we did not want to waste time evacuating when we could be useful here. If this had been a real emergency with actual dangerous radiation levels, we would have gotten out of here fast. But since it was not really dangerous, we decided to make ourselves useful. The command center fell silent as the implications of what they were hearing sank in. The humans had not ignored safety procedures out of recklessness or stupidity. They had analyzed the actual situation, determined the real level of risk, and taken appropriate action based on their assessment, rather than blindly following predetermined protocols. This is Dr. Zintar, came a new voice over the communicator, speaking in the musical tones of the Nexian language before switching to translated standard. I wish to commend these human students for their excellent assistance. They have helped me save several months of research work that would have been lost. 2 months into the exchange program, Professor Veltar had almost gotten used to the daily surprises that came with hosting human students. He had learned to expect the unexpected when it came to Jake Morrison and his companions. The humans had a way of making every ordinary situation into a learning experience, usually one that challenged everything the university thought it knew about proper procedures. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Professor Veltar was in his office, reviewing the latest reports from the human dormitory supervisors when the first alerts began flashing on his communication screen. The automated systems were detecting unusual solar activity, but the readings seemed routine. Zephyria Prime's advanced planetary shields were designed to handle even the strongest solar storms with ease. Kriya burst into his office without announcing herself, her usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious panic. Professor, we have a serious problem. The solar monitoring station is reporting massive solar flare activity. The biggest storm in over 300 years is heading directly for Zephyria Prime. Veltar looked at his screens and felt his 4 stomachs drop. The numbers were unlike anything he had ever seen. Solar radiation levels were climbing far beyond normal parameters. How long until it reaches us? Approximately 4 hours, Krija replied, her voice trembling. But Professor, There is worse news. The initial wave has already begun hitting our outer sensor grid. The planetary shield generators are showing stress indicators. Before Veltar could respond, his emergency communicator began broadcasting urgent messages from the Planetary Defense Center. The voice was calm but serious, using the formal tone reserved for genuine emergencies. Attention all citizens and off-world visitors. We are experiencing unprecedented solar storm activity. Please remain in your current locations while protective measures are evaluated. Do not attempt to travel or engage in outdoor activities until further notice. Within minutes, the university's own emergency systems activated. Warning lights began flashing throughout the campus, and automated announcements instructed all students and faculty to report to their designated safe zones immediately. Unlike the regular drills, there was a sense of real urgency in the air. The alien students responded exactly as they had been trained. They moved quickly, but calmly to the reinforced shelters located in the basements of each building. The Zephyrians filed into their assigned areas in perfect order. The Gornathi lumbered toward the larger shelters, designed to accommodate their massive frames. The Nexians flowed, like liquid light, into the specialized chambers that protected their crystalline forms from electromagnetic interference. Professor Veltar was coordinating the evacuation from the main command center when he noticed something. It made his blood freeze. The human life sign indicators showed all 4 students still in their dormitory building, but they were not moving toward the shelter areas. Instead, they appeared to be gathering in the common room on the top floor. Kresia, contact the human students immediately, Veltar ordered. They need to get to the shelters before the storm intensity increases. Kresia activated the communication system and connected to the human dormitory. Jake Morrison's voice came through clearly, with sounds of activity in the background. "Hey, Professor Veltar." "Yeah, we got the announcement about the solar storm. Pretty serious stuff. We are working on it." "Mr. Morrison, you need to evacuate to the basement shelters immediately," Veltar said urgently. "The solar radiation levels are becoming dangerous." "Actually, Professor, we have been monitoring the situation, and we think there might be a bigger problem than just radiation," Jake replied. "Lisa has been tracking the power grid fluctuations, and it looks like the planetary shields are in trouble." Veltar stared at his screens in confusion. The shield status indicators were showing green across the board. "Mr. Morrison, the planetary shields are functioning normally. Your safety depends on reaching the shelters before conditions worsen." "Professor," Lisa Chun's voice joined the conversation, "I hate to disagree, but the power consumption data we are seeing suggests the shield generators are working way harder than normal. The backup systems are already running at 60% capacity, and the storm has not even reached full intensity yet." Before Veltar could respond, the first wave of the solar storm struck Zephyria Prime. The impact was gentle at first, barely noticeable except for a slight flickering of the lights throughout the campus. But within minutes, the effects began, cascading through the university's systems. The main power grid experienced its first fluctuation at exactly 14:23 local time. The backup generators kicked in automatically, maintaining normal operations throughout the campus. The alien students in the shelters felt nothing more than a slight vibration through the building structure. But in the command center, Veltar watched in growing horror as system after system began showing warning indicators. The planetary shields were holding, but they were consuming power at an unprecedented rate. The backup energy reserves were depleting faster than anyone had anticipated. "Kresia, contact the Planetary Defense Center," Veltar ordered. "We need updated projections on shield sustainability." Before Kresia could make the call, Mike Patterson's voice came over the communicator from the human dormitory. "Professor, we have been doing some calculations up here, and we think you need to start planning for partial shield failure." Based on the power consumption trends, the generators are going to start overloading in about 2 hours. Veltar felt dizzy. How could the human students, with no access to the planetary defense systems, be making accurate predictions about shield performance? Mr. Patterson, you do not have access to the classified shield data. How can you possibly know about generator performance? We do not need classified data. Amy Rodriguez's voice joined in. We have been monitoring the public power grid information and cross-referencing it with the storm intensity readings. Basic engineering principles, really? When you push any system beyond its design limits, you can predict when it will start failing. As if summoned by Amy's words, Veltar's communication board lit up with an urgent message from the Planetary Defense Center. The shield generators were indeed approaching critical stress levels. The storm was proving to be stronger than their most pessimistic projections. All university personnel, this is an emergency update, the Planetary Defense Center announced. Over the main communication system, due to unprecedented storm intensity, we are implementing emergency power conservation measures. All non-essential systems will be shut down to preserve shield generator capacity. Throughout the campus, the lights dimmed as non-critical systems went offline. The alien students in the shelters murmured nervously as the familiar hum of the air recycling systems grew quieter. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the corridors above. But instead of growing quiet, the sounds of activity from the human dormitory actually increased. Veltar could hear them moving around, apparently gathering equipment and supplies. Mr. Morrison, what are you doing up there? Veltar asked. You should be conserving energy and staying as safe as possible. Actually, Professor, we are getting ready to help, Jake replied. If the shields start failing, the university is going to lose power to some critical systems. We want to be ready to provide emergency assistance wherever it is needed most. Help? Veltar repeated in bewilderment. Mr. Morrison, you are students, not emergency response specialists. Your job is to stay safe so that others do not have to worry about rescuing you. With respect, Professor, Lisa Chun interjected, that is exactly the kind of thinking that gets people killed in real emergencies. Sitting in a shelter waiting for someone else to fix the problem is fine when the problem is small and manageable. But when you have a genuine crisis that threatens the whole system, everyone who can help should help. The solar storm reached peak intensity at 1647 local time. The impact on Zephyria Prime was immediate and devastating. The planetary shields held, but 3 of the primary generators overloaded and shut down automatically to prevent permanent damage. Emergency power protocols activated throughout the planet, but the university's aging infrastructure was not designed to handle such severe power restrictions. The first building to lose life support was the Advanced Chemistry Lab Complex. The second was the Atmospheric Processing Center for the East Campus dormitories. Within minutes, the carefully controlled environment that the alien students depended on began breaking down in multiple locations. Emergency teams responded as quickly as possible, but they were overwhelmed by the scope of the crisis. There were simply too many problems happening simultaneously for the normal emergency procedures to handle effectively. That was when the human students emerged from their ring. Dormitory. Jake Morrison led the way, carrying what appeared to be a toolkit and several portable devices. Lisa Chun followed with a tablet displaying building schematics that she had downloaded from the university database. Mike Patterson and Amy Rodriguez brought up the rear, loaded down with emergency supplies and equipment they had gathered from various sources. Command Center, this is Jake Morrison, he announced over the emergency communication system. We are beginning emergency assistance operations. Lisa is heading to the Atmospheric Processing Center to help. The morning after the solar storm, Professor Veltar called for a special assembly in the main auditorium. Word had spread quickly throughout the campus about what the human students had accomplished during the crisis. The alien students filled the seats with unusual energy, their conversations buzzing with excitement and curiosity about the events they had witnessed. The Zephyrian students clustered together in their usual front sections, but their normally calm demeanor was replaced by animated discussion. The Gornathi rumbled among themselves in their deep voices, while the Nexians flickered with nervous energy. Even the usually reserved Antarians were gesticulating wildly with their tentacles as they shared their experiences from the previous day. Professor Veltar stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled students with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. He had spent most of the night reviewing the emergency response reports and trying to make sense of what had happened. The conclusions he had reached challenged everything he thought he knew about safety, education, and the nature of intelligent life in the galaxy. Students and faculty, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's translation systems. Yesterday, we experienced the most severe natural disaster in our planet's recorded history. The solar storm that struck Zephyria Prime exceeded all previous records and pushed our protective systems beyond their design limits. The alien students nodded solemnly. They had all felt the effects of the power failures and system breakdowns that had followed the storm's impact. During this crisis, Veltar continued, we learned something remarkable about emergency response and the nature of preparedness itself. I have asked our human exchange students to share their perspective on what happened so that we might all benefit from their experience. Jake Morrison stood up from his seat in the middle of the auditorium and made his way to the front. He looked remarkably casual for someone who had spent the previous day crawling through maintenance shafts and manually restarting critical systems. Lisa Chun, Mike Patterson, and Amy Rodriguez followed him, taking positions near the podium. Thank you, Professor Veltar, Jake said, looking out at the sea of alien faces watching him intently. I want to start by saying that we were not trying to show off or prove anything yesterday. We just did what seemed natural when we saw that people needed help. A young Zephyrian student raised her hand. Mr. Morrison, how did you know what to do during the emergency? You have only been here for 2 months, yet you seem to understand our systems better than students who have been here for years. Jake looked thoughtful for a moment. That is a good question. The truth is, we did not really understand your systems that well, but we understood the principles behind them. When you grow up on Earth, you learn that all systems can fail, and when they do, you have to figure out how to work around the problems. Lisa stepped forward to join the conversation. I think the real difference is in how we think about safety and risk, she said. From what we have observed here, your approach to safety is based on preventing problems before they happen. That is great when it works, but it does not prepare you for dealing with problems when they do happen anyway. Could you explain what you mean? Asked Dr. Zentar, the elderly Nexian professor who the humans had helped during the emergency drill. Sure, Lisa replied. On Earth, we live with constant threats. Weather that can kill you, animals that hunt you, natural disasters that can destroy entire cities. So from the time we are children, we learn to assess risks independently and make decisions based on incomplete information. Mike Patterson nodded and added, every human grows up learning basic emergency skills. We know how to start fires, find clean water, treat injuries, and improvise solutions when normal systems break down. Not because we plan to be in emergencies, but because emergencies happen whether you plan for them or not. A Gornathi student stood up, his massive form towering over the other students. But how do you know which risks are real and which are not? Yesterday, you ignored the evacuation procedures and stayed in dangerous areas. How did you know it was safe to do that? Amy Rodriguez smiled. We did not know it was completely safe, but we calculated that the real risks were lower than the potential benefits of helping. That is something humans do automatically. We weigh the actual danger against the potential good we can accomplish. On Earth, Jake explained, following safety rules blindly can get you killed just as easily as ignoring them. If you are in a burning building and the official exit is blocked, you do not just stand there waiting for rescue. You find another way out. If someone is drowning and you are not an official lifeguard, you still try to help them. Professor Veltar listened to this exchange with growing understanding. So you are saying that human safety training focuses on teaching people to think independently rather than follow specific procedures? Exactly, Lisa said. We learn principles and practice applying them in different situations. When we were children, we played games that taught us problem-solving skills. We learned to assess our environment, identify threats and opportunities, and make quick decisions based on limited information. A young Antarian student waved her tentacles for attention. But what if you make the wrong decision? What if your independent assessment is incorrect and you put yourself or others in danger? Mike Patterson considered this seriously. That does happen sometimes. Humans make mistakes, and sometimes people get hurt because of those mistakes. But we have learned that the risk of making a bad decision is usually smaller than the risk of making no decision at all. Plus, Amy added, when humans make mistakes, we learn from them and do better next time. Our safety knowledge grows and improves based on real experience rather than just theoretical scenarios. The auditorium fell silent as the alien students absorbed this information. Finally, a Nexian student asked the question that everyone was thinking. Are you saying that our safety procedures are wrong? Jake shook his head quickly. Not wrong, just incomplete. Your procedures are great for preventing common problems and keeping people safe in normal circumstances. But they do not prepare you for situations that fall outside the normal parameters. What happened yesterday, Lisa explained, was that your systems encountered a problem that was bigger than what they were designed to handle. Your emergency procedures worked exactly as they were supposed to work, but the problem was bigger than the procedures could solve. That is when you need people who can think beyond the procedures, Mike said. People who can look at a new situation and figure out what needs to be done, even if it is not in the manual. Professor Veltar realized that he was witnessing a fundamental shift in how the university understood education and preparedness. Mr. Morrison, are you suggesting that we should teach our students to ignore safety procedures? Not ignore them, Jake replied. Understand them. Learn why the procedures exist, what they are designed to accomplish, and when they might not be enough. Then learn to think beyond them when necessary. Amy nodded enthusiastically. On Earth, we say that rules and procedures are a starting point, not an ending point. They tell you what has worked in the past, but they cannot tell you what will work in a completely new situation. Dr. Zintar spoke up from his position in the faculty section. These young humans have taught us something profound about the nature of intelligence and adaptability. Perhaps it is time for us to reconsider how we approach education and emergency preparedness. Over the following weeks, the story of what happened during the solar storm spread throughout the Galactic University system and beyond. The human students became informal teachers, sharing their approach to problem solving and crisis management with students and faculty from dozens of species. That the university began incorporating new elements into its curriculum, teaching students not just what to do in specific emergency scenarios, but how to think through problems they had never encountered before. The rigid safety procedures remained in place, but they were supplemented with training in independent assessment and creative problem solving. Professor Veltar found himself completely revising his understanding of what it meant to be prepared for danger. The humans had shown him that true safety did not come from avoiding all risks, but from developing the skills and confidence to handle risks when they could not be avoided. The exchange program that had started as an experiment in interspecies Education became a model for how different civilizations could learn from each other. The aliens learned about adaptability and independent thinking from the humans. The humans learned about careful planning and systematic approaches from the aliens. But perhaps most importantly, the entire galactic community began to understand that the beings they had feared as dangerous Deathworlders were actually the most qualified teachers they could have asked for when it came to surviving in an unpredictable universe. 6 months later, when Professor Veltar submitted his final report to the Galactic University Council, he included a recommendation that would change how Deathworlders were viewed throughout known space. Instead of being classified as dangerous primitives who needed protection and extensive safety training, humans and other Deathworld species should be recognized as natural emergency response specialists whose skills could benefit